Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Foundations Built on Sacrifice. Ward Preston's hands were calloused and cracked. 32 years of pushing mops and hauling trash bags etched into every line. At 54, he'd spent more nights in hospital janitor closets than most people spent in their own homes. The fluorescent lights hummed their familiar song as he wrung out his mop for the last time that Friday evening, watching the dirty water swirl down the drain. His phone buzzed. A text from his son, Gregorio. Wedding is in 2 weeks. Don't embarrass me. Ward stared at the message, then at his reflection in the polished floor. He remembered the night 28 years ago when Gregorio's mother, Lakeisha, walked out of their apartment with nothing but a suitcase and a backward glance. Gregorio had been 3 months old, screaming in his crib, and Ward had been 26 with a high school diploma and a janitor's wage. "You'll never be anything," Lakeisha had said, "and neither will he." Ward proved her wrong the only way he knew how, through sheer, relentless work. Double shifts, triple shifts, sleeping 4 hours a night so Gregorio could have tutors, books, a chance. He'd watched other kids' fathers coach Little League while he mopped their offices. He'd missed every school play, every parent-teacher conference that fell during his shift, but he'd made sure Gregorio had everything. When the Harvard acceptance letter arrived, Ward had cried for the first time in 20 years. He'd framed it, hung it above his bed in their one-bedroom apartment. Gregorio had the bedroom, Ward took the couch. Now, reading that cold text message, something twisted in Ward's chest. He'd noticed a change over the past 5 years. Gregorio's visits became shorter, then stopped altogether. Phone calls turned to texts, text to silence. When Gregorio made partner at Morrison & Associates, Boston's most prestigious law firm, Ward had learned about it from a newspaper article, not his son. The wedding invitation had arrived 3 months late, forwarded to Ward's new address. He'd been evicted from their old apartment after Gregorio stopped sending money. The card was heavy, embossed, expensive. His name was handwritten at the bottom, almost as an afterthought. No +1. No acknowledgement of what Ward had sacrificed. Ward finished his shift and walked to the bus stop. The November wind cut through his thin jacket, the same one he'd worn for 8 years. As the bus rolled through Boston's wealthy neighborhoods toward his motel room in Dorchester, he watched young professionals laughing in restaurants, fathers playing with their children in warm, lit homes. He bought a suit for the wedding. It had cost him 2 weeks' wages, but he wanted to make Gregorio proud. He wanted his son to look at him and remember who'd made all this possible. The motel room smelled of mildew and old cigarettes. Ward hung his new suit carefully on the back of the door and sat on the sagging mattress. Tomorrow, he'd take it to get pressed. He wanted everything to be perfect. He had no idea that in 2 weeks, his entire world would shatter. Chapter 2. The Transformation. Gregorio Preston adjusted his Rolex, a gift from his fiancée's father, Pasquale Ortega, who owned half the commercial real estate in Boston. He stood in his corner office at Morrison & Associates, looking down at the city that had once seemed unreachable to a kid from Dorchester. "Gregorio, the Hartman deposition is ready," his assistant said, poking her head through the door. "Cancel it," Gregorio said without turning. "I have wedding details to finalize." He'd worked hard to bury his past. When he'd arrived at Harvard, he'd been ashamed of his threadbare clothes, his accent, the way he didn't know which fork to use at the welcome dinner. He'd watched the legacy kids, like his roommate, Derek Clay, glide through life on connections and confidence. So Gregorio had transformed himself. He'd studied their mannerisms, copied their speech patterns, invented a new history. His father? A businessman who'd passed away. His childhood? Private schools, summer homes in the Hamptons. By junior year, even he almost believed the lies. Meeting Mandy Ortega had been the final piece. Beautiful, connected, from a family that could open any door. When she'd introduced him to her father, Gregorio had seen his future crystallize. Pasquale Ortega didn't just accept him. He made him partner at Morrison & Associates after only 3 years. But Ward Preston didn't fit into this new life. Every time Gregorio saw his father, he saw the tiny apartment, the smell of industrial cleaner, the pitying looks from his Harvard friends when Ward had visited campus wearing his janitor's uniform because he'd come straight from work. The wedding was Gregorio's grand debut into Boston's elite. 500 guests, including judges, senators, and CEOs. The reception at the Four Seasons. Everything perfect, curated, expensive. His phone rang. Pasquale Ortega. Son, I've been looking over the guest list. Pasquale's gravelly voice came through. I don't see your father's table assignment. Gregorio's jaw tightened. He'd hoped the old man wouldn't notice. He's not in good health. Probably won't make it. That's unfortunate. I wanted to thank him. Mandy says he raised you alone. Must be a hell of a man. Guilt flickered through Gregorio, but he crushed it. He did his best with what he had. After hanging up, Gregorio looked at his phone. Ward had sent him a text last week asking about the dress code. Gregorio hadn't responded. Maybe Ward would get the hint and stay away. But even as he thought it, Gregorio knew his father would come. Ward Preston was nothing if not stubborn. And that meant Gregorio would have to handle the situation when it arrived. He'd come too far to let his past ruin his future. Chapter 3. The Wedding Day. The Four Seasons ballroom glittered like a diamond, every surface reflecting wealth and power. Ward Preston stood outside the grand entrance, his pressed suit suddenly feeling cheap under the chandelier light. His invitation trembled slightly in his hand. May I see your invitation, sir? A security guard materialized beside him. Ward handed it over, watching the guard's eyes scan it, then scan Ward himself. The comparison was clear. Ward didn't belong. Table 47, the guard said, returning the card. In the back. Inside, the ballroom was a cathedral of privilege. Ice sculptures, crystal everywhere, an orchestra playing Vivaldi. Ward spotted Gregorio immediately. His son stood surrounded by men in expensive suits, laughing at something. Gregorio wore a tuxedo that probably cost more than Ward made in 6 months. Mandy Ortega was beautiful in her white gown, dripping with diamonds. Her father, Pasquale, held court nearby, a short, powerful man who commanded attention without raising his voice. Ward made his way toward his table, hoping to catch Gregorio's eye, to share a smile. But Gregorio turned away, deliberately, and Ward felt the cut like a knife. Table 47 was in the far corner, behind a pillar, obscured from the main room. Ward sat alone. The other chairs remained empty. He watched the ceremony from a distance, his son's back to him the entire time. During the reception, Ward gathered his courage. He'd brought a gift, a watch that had belonged to Gregorio's grandfather, the only thing of value Ward owned. It was real gold, vintage worth something. He approached Gregorio during a lull in the festivities. Son, Ward said quietly, congratulations. Gregorio froze. His eyes went wide then hard. What are you doing here? I'm your father. It's your wedding. People were starting to notice. Mandy appeared at Gregorio's elbow, her smile faltering when she saw Ward. Greg, is everything okay? Everything's fine, Gregorio said through clenched teeth. This man was just leaving. This man, Ward's voice cracked. Gregorio, I raised you. I sacrificed everything. You were a janitor who couldn't keep a wife, Gregorio hissed. You think I want these people knowing I came from that? Look at you. You're pathetic. Ward reached out. Please, son. I just wanted to give you this. Gregorio slapped Ward's hand away. The watchbox fell, clattering on the marble floor. The room went silent. You're a failure, Gregorio said loudly, ensuring everyone could hear. You've always been a failure. You embarrassed me my entire life, and I won't let you embarrass me today. Get lost. He snapped his fingers. 2 security guards appeared. Escort this man out. He's not welcome here. Ward stood frozen as hundreds of eyes watched. He saw pity in some faces, disgust in others, amusement in many. Mandy looked away, uncomfortable but not intervening. Pasquale Ortega watched from across the room, his expression unreadable. The security guards gripped Ward's arms, not rough, but firm. They walked him through the silent ballroom, past the ice sculptures and champagne fountains, out into the cold November night. Ward stood on the sidewalk as the doors closed behind him. Through the windows, he could see the party resume, his son laughing again, this moment already forgotten. Ward picked up his fallen watch box from where a guard had tossed it after him. He walked to the nearest bus stop, his new suit already feeling like a costume, and rode back to his motel room in Dorchester. Chapter 4. The Woman at the Door. Ward sat on the edge of his motel bed at 11 p.m., still wearing his suit. He hadn't moved since returning 3 hours ago. The humiliation played on repeat in his mind. The slap, the words, the eyes. "You're a failure." A knock on the door startled him from his thoughts. Ward opened it to find a woman in her mid-40s, wearing a dark coat despite the cold. Her face was lined with grief, her eyes carrying a weight he recognized. "Ward Preston?" she asked. "Who's asking?" "My name is Dina O'Connell. We've never met, but we share something in common. We've both been destroyed by your son." Ward's exhaustion evaporated. "What are you talking about?" Dina pulled out a folder, thick with documents. "May I come in? What I have to tell you will change everything." 5 minutes later, Ward was reading through police reports, newspaper clippings, and photographs, while Dina O'Connell spoke in a voice that shook with controlled rage. 7 years ago, my daughter Misty was a junior at Harvard. Pre-med, brilliant, beautiful. She was walking home from a library one night when a car hit her. Dina's voice broke. Hit and run. They found her 3 hours later. By then, it was too late. She died in the ambulance. Ward looked up from a photograph of a young woman with bright eyes and a warm smile. "I'm sorry for your loss, but your son was driving the car." The words hung in the air like a guillotine blade. "That's impossible," Ward said, but his voice lacked conviction. Dina pulled out more documents. Gregorio Preston was a sophomore at Harvard. He'd been at a fraternity party. Multiple witnesses saw him drinking heavily. Security footage shows his car leaving campus at 10:47 p.m., 15 minutes before Misty was hit on Mount Auburn Street. But when police investigated, they found another student, Darren Hartman, passed out in a car 2 blocks away. Darren's blood alcohol was 0.18. He confessed, said he didn't remember anything. Then how do you know it was Gregorio? Because I've spent 7 years investigating. Darren Hartman's car was blue. Witnesses at the scene reported a black car. Gregorio drove a black BMW, a gift from his fraternity brothers. Paint samples from Misty's clothing matched that BMW model. But here's the thing. Dina leaned forward, her eyes burning with intensity. The next day, Gregorio's car was gone. Sold to a junkyard in New Hampshire, crushed within 48 hours. And Darren Hartman suddenly had $50,000 deposited into his account, a family gift according to records. Ward's hands trembled as he looked through the evidence. Bank statements, DMV records, witness testimonies that didn't quite align. Darren Hartman had served 3 years for vehicular manslaughter. He'd been released 2 years ago and immediately left the country. "Why come to me now?" Ward asked. "Because I've been building a case for 7 years. But I need help. I'm a grieving mother. Police see me as obsessed, desperate. Every lawyer I've approached says the case is closed. The evidence is circumstantial. But you," Dina's voice hardened with purpose, "you're his father. You have access he'd never suspect." And after what happened tonight, she pulled out her phone, showing a video that had already hit social media. Ward watched himself being escorted out of the wedding, Gregorio's voice clear. "You're a failure." "This video has 50,000 views already," Dina said. "Your son is trending. People are calling him cruel, entitled. But by Monday, it'll blow over, and he'll go back to his perfect life. Unless we do something about it." Ward looked at Misty's photograph again, a girl with her whole life ahead of her. He thought about Gregorio, the boy he'd raised, the man he'd become. "What do you want from me?" Dina smiled, though it held no warmth. "I want justice for my daughter. And I think you want your son to understand that actions have consequences." "Ow!" "Your son is defending a major case, the Mosley Corporation fraud trial. It's all over the news. If he wins, he makes senior partner and the Ortega family solidifies their power. But," Dina pulled out another folder, "I've been watching him. Gregorio cuts corners. He's brilliant, but he's arrogant. And arrogant people make mistakes. Ward stared at the evidence spread across his motel bed. His son, a killer. His son, who'd let an innocent man go to prison. His son, who'd called him a failure. "I need time to think," Ward said. "You have until Monday," Dina replied, standing. "After that, I'm going to the media with what I have. It might not be enough to convict him, but it'll destroy his reputation." Or, she paused at the door. "We can work together and make sure he pays for everything. Your choice." After she left, Ward sat in the dark for hours. Outside, the city hummed with life. Inside, a father mourned the son he thought he'd raised and contemplated the monster that son had become. By dawn, Ward Preston had made his decision. Chapter 5. The Investigation. Ward Preston had worked as a janitor for 3 decades, invisible in hospitals, office buildings, and courtrooms. People talked around janitors like they were furniture. They left documents on desks, had conversations on phones, tossed important papers in the trash without a second thought. For the first time in his life, Ward would use that invisibility as a weapon. Monday morning, he called Dina O'Connell. "I'm in, but we do this smart, and we do it right." They met at a diner in Somerville, far from Gregorio's world. Dina brought Edmundo Underwood, a former police detective who'd been forced into retirement after questioning the official narrative of Misty's death. Edmundo was in his 60s, gray-haired and sharp-eyed. "I was the responding officer that night," Edmundo explained, stirring his coffee. Something didn't add up. Darren Hartman was found 2 blocks from the scene, passed out. But the impact pattern on Misty's body suggested the car was going at least 50 miles per hour. Darren was barely conscious. How did he drive that fast, hit someone, and then travel 2 more blocks before passing out? "Why didn't you pursue it?" Ward asked. Edmundo's jaw tightened. "I tried, but Darren confessed almost immediately. His lawyer convinced him that fighting it would mean 10 years instead of 3. The department wanted it closed. And when I kept pushing," he shrugged, "suddenly I was unfit for duty. Forced retirement at 58. Gregorio had help covering this up," Dina said. "Rich friends, powerful connections even back then. We need to prove he was driving that car. And we need evidence that will hold up in court, in the media, everywhere." Ward thought for a moment. The Mosley trial. Dina mentioned it. "Tell me more." Dina pulled out newspapers. Lorenzo Mosley, a real estate developer, was accused of fraud, selling properties with undisclosed environmental contamination. Gregorio was lead counsel for the defense. If he won, Morrison and Associates would earn $15 million in fees, and Gregorio would become senior partner. "The trial starts in 3 weeks, Dina said. "It's high profile. Every news outlet in Boston is covering it." An idea began forming in Ward's mind. What if we expose Gregorio's past during the trial? Maximum publicity, maximum pressure. "We need more evidence first," Edmundo cautioned. "Right now, we have circumstantial connections. We need something concrete." Ward made a decision that surprised even himself. "I can get inside Morrison and Associates. They hire janitors through a contracting company. I've worked for them before." "You want to spy on your own son?" Dina asked. "I want to find the truth," Ward corrected. "If Gregorio is innocent, the evidence will show that. But if he's guilty," Ward's voice hardened, "then he needs to face what he's done." Within a week, Ward was working night shifts at Morrison and Associates, mopping floors in the same building where his son worked. The irony wasn't lost on him. Gregorio's office was on the 42nd floor. Ward had access to it after 8 p.m., when most attorneys had left. He wore gloves, was careful, methodical. He didn't steal anything. That would be noticed. But he photographed documents with a cheap camera phone Edmundo had given him. Client files, phone records, billing statements. On the 3rd night, Ward hit gold. Tucked in a locked drawer, which Ward had learned to pick from a YouTube video, he found a personal file. Letters, photographs, mementos from Harvard. And there, buried beneath old report cards and fraternity photos, was a receipt from Prestige Auto Salvage in Nashua, New Hampshire. Dated the day after Misty O'Connell's death. Payment, $3,500 for a 2016 black BMW 3 Series. Ward photographed it with shaking hands. But the real discovery came in Gregorio's computer. The password was pathetically simple: Mandy's birthday. Ward wasn't tech-savvy, but Edmundo had given him a USB drive that automatically searched for specific keywords: Harvard, Misty, Darren, accident. The search hit on an email thread from 7 years ago. Gregorio's Harvard email account, which he'd apparently never deleted. Greg, Dad's people handled it. Hartman will take the fall. $50,000 is cheap for your future. Destroy this email. PC. Pasquale Ortega. Mandy's father had helped cover up the hit and run. Ward photographed everything, his heart pounding. This was it. Proof that Gregorio had been involved. Proof that Pasquale Ortega had orchestrated a cover-up. Proof that an innocent man had gone to prison. As Ward closed the drawer and reset everything exactly as he'd found it, he noticed one more thing: a photograph on Gregorio's desk. It was from Harvard graduation. Gregorio stood with Pasquale Ortega and Mandy, all smiling. In the corner of the photo, barely visible, was Ward himself. Gregorio had cropped him out, but whoever had framed the photo had included just enough of the original to show Ward's shadow. Even then, Gregorio had been erasing him. Ward met with Dina and Edmundo the next morning. When he saw the evidence, Dina wept. Edmundo's face became granite. "This is enough for the police," Edmundo said. "We reopen the investigation." "No," Ward said, surprising them both. "Going to the police now, Gregorio and Pasquale will bury it again. They have too much power, too many connections. We need to do this publicly, where they can't hide." "Ow," Dina asked. Ward pulled out a newspaper, showing Gregorio's face on the front page. A profile piece about the upcoming Mosley trial. "We use the trial. We expose him where everyone is watching. And we make sure that when we do, there's no way for him to escape." Chapter 6. The Trap. Ward Preston had spent 3 weeks planning every detail. The Mosley trial had become Boston's courtroom drama. Media packed the courthouse daily. Live updates streamed online. Legal analysts debated strategy on television. Gregorio Preston was winning. His cross-examinations were surgical, his arguments brilliant. Lorenzo Mosley's fraud charges seemed ready to crumble under Gregorio's defense. Victory was days away. But Ward had learned something from 30 years of invisible work. Timing was everything. Edmundo Underwood had connections, retired cops who owed him favors, journalists who'd been stonewalled 7 years ago when questioning Misty's death, prosecutors who'd always suspected the Hartman confession was too convenient. Dina O'Connell had persistence. She tracked down Darren Hartman in Thailand and convinced him to talk, recording his confession that he'd been paid to take the fall, that he'd been so drunk that night he couldn't remember anything, that powerful people had promised him it would be better this way. And Ward had access. His janitor position at Morrison & Associates gave him something invaluable: knowledge of Gregorio's routines, his security protocols, his arrogance. The plan was simple in concept, complex in execution. They would expose Gregorio during the Mosley trial's closing arguments, the moment of his greatest triumph, before the largest audience. But exposure alone wasn't enough. They needed Gregorio to confess, to react, to destroy himself publicly. "We need him unstable," Edmundo said during their planning session. "Confident people don't make mistakes. Scare people do." Ward knew exactly how to scare his son. They started small. Anonymous emails to Gregorio's office. "I know what happened to Misty O'Connell." At first, Gregorio ignored them. Then Ward escalated. He left a photocopy of the auto salvage receipt on Gregorio's desk. No note, just the receipt. Ward watched from the security cameras. Edmundo had convinced the building's security chief, an old colleague, to give them access. Gregorio found the receipt at 10 p.m. when he returned from dinner with Mandy. His face went white. He looked around the empty office, then quickly shredded the receipt. The next day, they sent the same receipt to Pasquale Ortega's office, then to Mandy, then to the senior partners at Morrison & Associates. Gregorio was spiraling. Ward could see it during his nightly cleaning shifts. His son looked exhausted, paranoid. He'd installed cameras in his office, changed his locks, started carrying his files with him everywhere. Good. Scare people made mistakes. The final piece came from an unexpected source. Wilfredo Waters, a paralegal at Morrison and Associates who'd worked with Gregorio on the Mosley case, approached Edmundo. Wilfredo was young, idealistic, and had stumbled onto something during case preparation. Gregorio's been lying about evidence, Wilfredo told them, visibly nervous. The Mosley case, some of the environmental reports were altered. Not by Mosley, by us. Gregorio buried tests that showed the contamination was worse than disclosed. People bought those properties. Kids play in those yards. More victims. More lies. Will you testify? Edmundo asked. Wilfredo hesitated, then nodded. I became a lawyer to help people, not to poison them. Now they had everything. Evidence of the hit-and-run cover-up. Evidence of witness tampering. Evidence of ongoing fraud in Gregorio's current case. And they had witnesses willing to speak. The Mosley trial entered its final week. Gregorio's closing arguments were scheduled for Friday afternoon. The courtroom would be packed, the media present, the stakes highest. Ward made one final preparation. He wrote a letter to his son, not threatening, not angry, simply honest. He detailed every sacrifice he'd made, every shift worked, every dream deferred. He explained what it meant to watch the child you'd raised become a stranger. And he ended with a question. Was it worth it, Gregorio? Was destroying everyone in your path worth the life you bought? He didn't sign it. He left it on Gregorio's desk Thursday night, the night before closing arguments. Friday morning, Ward positioned himself in the courthouse gallery. Dina sat beside him, rigid with anticipation. Edmundo was outside, coordinating with reporters, prosecutors, and the one person whose testimony would shatter everything, Darren Hartman, who'd flown back from Thailand the night before. Gregorio entered the courtroom at 9 a.m. sharp, looking sharp but strained. His eyes swept the gallery and stopped on Ward. For a moment, father and son locked eyes. Gregorio's face twisted with confusion, then recognition, then rage. He'd gotten the letter. The judge entered. We'll begin with closing arguments. Mr. Preston, you may proceed. Gregorio stood, adjusted his tie, and approached the jury. He was brilliant even under pressure, his voice steady, his arguments sharp. He was minutes from victory. That's when the courtroom doors opened. Chapter 7, The Unraveling. 3 people entered the courtroom. A uniformed police officer, a woman in her 60s with a face carved by grief, and a man in his late 20s who looked like he hadn't slept in years. Darren Hartman. Gregorio's closing argument died mid-sentence. His face went from confident to pale in seconds. The judge looked up, confused. Your Honor, Edmundo Underwood stood from the gallery. I apologize for the interruption, but new evidence has emerged relevant to Mr. Preston's fitness to practice law. This is highly irregular, Judge Raymond Larson said. Bailiff. Your Honor, I'm Detective Jared Green from the Boston Police Department's Cold Case Unit. The uniformed officer stepped forward. We've reopened an investigation into the 2018 death of Misty O'Connell. Evidence suggests Mr. Gregorio Preston was involved in a vehicular manslaughter that resulted in wrongful conviction of an innocent man. The courtroom erupted. Reporters frantically typed. Cameras flashed. Lorenzo Mosley's prosecutors looked stunned. Gregorio stood frozen at the podium. This is absurd, Gregorio finally managed. Your Honor, this is a transparent attempt to sabotage. I was paid to take the fall. Darren Hartman's voice cut through the noise. He walked down the center aisle, every eye on him. $50,000 to confess to a crime I didn't commit. I was drunk, I was scared, and they told me it would be better this way. I served 3 years in prison for Gregorio Preston. That's a lot, Gregorio shouted. I had nothing to do with. We have evidence, Edmundo said calmly, approaching the bench with a folder. Bank records showing a $50,000 transfer from an account controlled by Pasquale Ortega to Darren Hartman. Auto salvage receipts showing Mr. Preston disposed of his vehicle the day after the incident. And Edmundo pulled out the final piece. An email from Pasquale Ortega to Gregorio Preston, sent the night of Misty O'Connell's death, explicitly discussing the cover-up. Judge Larson took the documents, his expression darkening as he read. The courtroom had gone silent. everyone watching Gregorio's perfect facade crack. Where did you get that email? Gregorio demanded, his voice rising. That's protected. That's privileged. It was in your office, son. Ward stood from the gallery. His voice was quiet but carried through the silent room. In your drawer, with all your other secrets. Gregorio's eyes locked on his father. You, he breathed. You did this. I found the truth, Ward replied. The truth you buried under money and lies. Mandy Ortega rushed into the courtroom, her father Pasquale close behind. They'd been alerted by courthouse staff. Pasquale's face was thunderous. Your Honor, this is clearly, Pasquale began. Mr. Ortega, Judge Larson interrupted, his voice ice. According to these documents, you orchestrated obstruction of justice in a vehicular manslaughter case. I suggest you retain counsel immediately. Pasquale's confidence evaporated. The judge turned to Gregorio. Mr. Preston, I'm suspending these proceedings pending investigation into these allegations. Furthermore, I'm referring this matter to the Massachusetts Bar Association for immediate review of your license to practice law. No, Gregorio whispered. Then louder, no, you can't do this. I work for everything I have. I built this life. On a dead girl's grave, Dina O'Connell stepped forward. She'd been silent until now, watching the man who'd killed her daughter face justice. You killed my Misty and let an innocent man go to prison. You built your perfect life on her body. Mandy looked between her father and her husband, realization dawning. Greg, is this true? Gregorio turned to his wife, desperate. Mandy, you have to believe me. They're lying. They're trying to destroy us. I saw the email. Wilfredo Waters stood up in the gallery. The young paralegal's voice shook but held firm. I saw in the office files. And I saw what you did on the Mosley case, the altered environmental reports, the buried evidence. You didn't just lie 7 years ago. You're still lying. The prosecutors for the Mosley case were already conferencing urgently. One of them stood. Your Honor, in light of these revelations, the Commonwealth requests an immediate investigation into the defense's case preparation and potential evidence tampering. Everything was collapsing. Gregorio looked around wildly, at the judge, at his wife, at his father-in-law, at the reporters documenting every second. This is your fault, Gregorio suddenly screamed at Ward. You were supposed to be nobody, nothing. You were supposed to stay invisible. But you couldn't just accept that I moved beyond you. The courtroom went silent. Even Gregorio seemed to realize what he'd said. I worked too hard, Gregorio continued, his voice breaking. I came from nothing. Do you know what that's like? Being the janitor's kid? Being the scholarship student? I deserve better. I deserved everything I built, even if you had to kill for it. Ward asked quietly. Gregorio's face contorted. For a moment, Ward saw something, guilt, maybe, or just the realization that it was over. I didn't mean to hit her, Gregorio whispered. Then louder, to the courtroom, the confession spilling out. I didn't mean to. It was dark, I was drunk, she just stepped out. I panicked. I called Pasquale, and he said he'd fix it. I didn't know Darren would go to prison. You thought you could get away with it, Edmundo finished. And you did. For 7 years. Detective Green stepped forward with handcuffs. Gregorio Preston, you're under arrest for vehicular manslaughter, obstruction of justice, and witness tampering. As the cuffs clicked around Gregorio's wrists, Mandy Ortega began to cry. Pasquale was already on his phone with his lawyer. The reporters were rushing out to file stories. Lorenzo Mosley looked vindicated. His case would likely result in a mistrial, possibly dismissal. Gregorio looked at his father one last time as they led him away. I hate you, he said. Ward met his eyes. I know, but I still love you enough to make sure you face what you've done. Chapter 8, Consequences. The media firestorm that followed was unprecedented. Within hours, every news outlet in Boston was running the story. Harvard lawyer arrested in 7-year-old hit-and-run cover-up. The wedding video resurfaced with new context. Gregorio publicly humiliating his father, the same father who'd ultimately brought him to justice. Public opinion was savage and immediate. Social media erupted with commentary, most of it condemning Gregorio's cruelty and celebrating Ward's courage. The phrase, janitor's justice started trending. Ward Preston found himself in a strange new world. Reporters camped outside his motel room. TV producers called offering interviews. A publisher wanted him to write a book. He declined all of it and focused on what mattered, ensuring Gregorio and Pasquale faced real consequences. The Massachusetts Bar Association moved quickly. Within a week, Gregorio's law license was suspended pending the outcome of criminal charges. Morrison and Associates released a statement terminating his partnership effective immediately. Clients began pulling their business from the firm. The Mosley trial ended in a mistrial. Prosecutors discovered the altered environmental reports, thanks to Wilfredo Waters' testimony, and opened a separate investigation into Morrison and Associates practices. Several other cases Gregorio had worked on came under scrutiny. Pasquale Ortega was charged with obstruction of justice and accessory after the fact. His real estate empire began crumbling as investors fled and partners distanced themselves. The man who controlled half of Boston's commercial property market was toxic overnight. Mandy Ortega filed for divorce exactly 2 weeks after Gregorio's arrest. The prenuptial agreement Gregorio had signed, at Pasquale's insistence, ironically, left him with almost nothing. But the most satisfying moment came a month later, during Gregorio's bail hearing. Ward sat in the courtroom gallery, not in the back this time, but in the front row. Dina O'Connell beside him, Edmundo on her other side. Darren Hartman had returned to Thailand, but sent a video statement that was played in court. I lost 3 years of my life to protect a rich kid. I hope he gets what he deserves. Gregorio entered in County Jail Orange, a far cry from his expensive suits. His lawyer, a public defender, since all his assets were frozen, argued for reasonable bail. The prosecutor stood. Your Honor, Mr. Preston has substantial means hidden in offshore accounts, connections internationally through his wife's family, and a demonstrated willingness to obstruct justice. He's an extreme flight risk. I have nowhere to go, Gregorio said, his voice hollow. Everything I built is gone. Judge Larson, the same judge from the Mosley trial, looked at Gregorio with undisguised contempt. Mr. Preston, you took a young woman's life and allowed an innocent man to suffer for your crime. You built a career on lies and destroyed anyone who threatened your image, including, apparently, your own father. Bail is denied. You'll remain in custody until trial. As they led Gregorio away, he looked at Ward one last time. Not with hate this time, with something closer to despair. That evening, Ward met with Dina at a small restaurant in Cambridge. She looked lighter than she had in their entire acquaintance, as if a weight had been lifted. They're offering him a plea deal, Dina said. 20 years with possibility of parole after 12. His lawyer says he'll probably take it. Ward nodded slowly. 20 years. Gregorio would be 50 when he got out. His entire life changed. How do you feel? Dina asked. Ward considered the question. Tired. Sad. But certain. This needed to happen. My daughter can rest now, Dina said, tears in her eyes. Thank you, Ward. Thank you for caring about a girl you never met. I'm sorry my son took her from you. They sat in silence for a while, two people connected by tragedy and justice. A week later, Ward received an unexpected visitor at his motel room. Mandy Ortega stood at his door, looking nothing like the radiant bride from the wedding. She was pale, thin, exhausted. May I come in? She asked. Ward let her in, wary. Mandy sat on the room's single chair, Ward on the bed. I wanted to say I'm sorry, she began. At the wedding, I knew Greg was being cruel. I should have said something. I should have stood up for you. You didn't know me. No, but I knew what was right. Mandy's voice cracked. I've been going through Greg's things, trying to understand how I married someone I didn't know at all. I found letters you wrote him over the years. Dozens of them. You never gave up on him, even when he'd given up on you. Ward remembered those letters. Sent to Gregorio's Harvard dorm, his first apartment, his office. Most had gone unanswered. My father helped Greg cover up a murder, Mandy continued. He's facing 10 years in prison. My family's empire is collapsing. And my husband, she laughed bitterly. My husband killed a woman and let someone else pay for it. I don't know who I've been living with. I'm sorry, Ward said, meaning it. Don't be. You did the right thing. Mandy stood to leave, then paused. Greg asked me to visit him in jail. I went once. He spent the whole time talking about how you betrayed him, how you destroyed his life. He still doesn't understand what he did wrong. Maybe he never will. Probably not. But Mandy met Ward's eyes. I'm glad you were strong enough to do what his own mother couldn't. Someone needed to stop him before he destroyed more lives. After she left, Ward sat alone in his motel room. Tomorrow, he'd return to work, not as a janitor anymore. Edmundo had gotten him a job as a security consultant, helping companies identify vulnerabilities. The pay was better, the work meaningful. But tonight, Ward just sat and thought about the son he'd raised and the man that son had become. He mourned the boy who'd once hugged him and said, "I love you, Dad." He mourned the future they'd never have. But he didn't regret what he'd done. Justice, Ward had learned, sometimes required sacrifice, even when that sacrifice was the relationship with your own child. Chapter 9, Redemption. 6 months later, Ward Preston stood outside Cedar Junction State Prison, waiting for visiting hours to begin. He'd made this trip every 2 weeks since Gregorio's sentencing. 15 years with the possibility of parole after 10. After Gregorio pled guilty to vehicular manslaughter, obstruction of justice, and evidence tampering. Gregorio had refused to see him every single time. "You know he's not going to see you," the guard said as Ward signed the visitor log. They'd become familiar with each other over the months. "Same as always." "I know," Ward replied, "but I come anyway." He waited in the visitation room for an hour before the guard returned. "Sorry, Mr. Preston." He declined again. Ward nodded, not surprised, and left his usual package at the desk. Books, a letter, money for Gregorio's commissary account. Every visit, the same ritual. Every visit, the same rejection. As Ward walked to his car, his phone rang. Dina O'Connell. "Ward, are you sitting down?" Her voice was excited. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Everything's right. Darren Hartman just set up a scholarship fund at Harvard, the Misty O'Connell Memorial Scholarship. It's for pre-med students from underprivileged backgrounds. His settlement from the wrongful conviction lawsuit. He's putting most of it into the fund." Ward felt tears prick his eyes. "That's beautiful. And there's more. The environmental contamination case from the Mosley trial. The families affected? They won their lawsuit. Morrison and Associates is bankrupt. All those altered reports you and Wilfredo exposed? The judge ruled the firm liable for damages. The families are getting $20 million in compensation. Good news built on the foundation of truth. It didn't erase what Gregorio had done, but it helped. That evening, Ward returned to his apartment. A real apartment now, 1 bedroom in Somerville with actual windows and heat that worked. He'd left the motel 3 months ago. On his table was a letter forwarded from the motel. Ward almost didn't recognize the handwriting. He hadn't seen it in years. But the return address was unmistakable, Cedar Junction State Prison. Ward opened it with shaking hands. "Dad, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve forgiveness. But I need you to understand something. I spent 6 months blaming you for destroying my life. I told myself you were jealous, vindictive, that you couldn't stand seeing me succeed. I convinced myself I was the victim. But there's not much to do in here except think. And I've been thinking about Misty O'Connell a lot. Her face was in all the news coverage, smiling, alive, with a future. I took that from her. I took it, and then I let someone else pay for what I'd done. I've been thinking about Darren Hartman, 3 years in prison for my crime. I've been thinking about those families who bought contaminated properties, kids who got sick because I buried evidence. And I've been thinking about you. You worked yourself to exhaustion for me. You gave me everything. Opportunities, education, a chance at a life you never had. And I repaid you with shame and cruelty. At the wedding, I told you that you were a failure. But I'm a failure, Dad. I had every advantage. Your sacrifice, my education, my opportunities, and I used them to become a liar and a killer. You came from nothing and became a man of integrity. I had everything and became a monster. I don't know if I can ever be the son you deserved. I don't know if I can even become a decent person after what I've done. But I'm going to try. I've been working with the prison education program, teaching other inmates to read. It's not much, but it's something. And I've started meeting with a therapist. There's a program here for for people who want to take accountability for their crimes. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not asking you to come back. I just needed you to know that you were right about everything, and that even though it took me 30 years in a prison cell to understand it, I'm proud to be your son, even if I never deserved to be. I love you, Dad. I'm sorry it took this long to say it. Gregorio. Ward read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down his face. He thought about the boy who'd once fallen asleep on his shoulder after a long day, who'd called him superhero when Ward fixed his broken toys with duct tape and hope. That boy was still in there somewhere, buried under years of lies and ambition and shame. Ward pulled out paper and began to write back. He told Gregorio about the scholarship fund, about the families getting compensation, about the good that had come from facing the truth. He told him about his new job, his new apartment, the life he was building. And he told Gregorio something he'd never stopped believing. I'm proud of you for taking responsibility. That takes more courage than running ever did. You're not starting over. You're starting to become who you were always meant to be. The next visiting day, Ward made his usual trip to Cedar Junction. But this time, when the guard checked the visitor log, he smiled. He approved your visit, Mr. Preston. He's waiting for you. Ward walked into the visitation room, his heart pounding. Gregorio sat at a table in prison orange, thinner than Ward remembered, with dark circles under his eyes. But when he saw Ward, he stood up. Father and son looked at each other for a long moment. Then Gregorio spoke, his voice rough with emotion. Hi, Dad. Hi, son. They sat down across from each other. The conversation was awkward at first. Too much pain, too much history. But slowly they began to talk about the past, the truth, the future. I'm going to be here a long time, Gregorio said. 10 years minimum. I know. I'm going to use that time. I'm going to be better. I know you will. Gregorio's eyes filled with tears. I'm so sorry. For everything. For Misty, for Darren, for you, for all of it. Ward reached across the table and took his son's hand. I know, and we're going to get through this. Together. They talked until visiting hours ended. As Ward prepared to leave, Gregorio called out to him. Dad, thank you for not giving up on me, for making me face what I'd done, for being the man you are. Ward smiled, genuine and warm. That's what fathers do, son. We love you enough to help you become better, even when it hurts. As Ward walked out of the prison into the afternoon sun, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. His son had a long road ahead. Years of prison, therapy, atonement. But Gregorio was finally walking that road honestly. Ward got in his car and drove back to Somerville. Tomorrow, he'd start planning his next visit. He'd bring more books, more letters, more support. Because that's what you did for the people you loved. You showed up, you told the truth, and you helped them find their way back to who they were meant to be. Ward Preston had been called a failure by the son he'd raised. But in the end, he'd proven that success wasn't measured in money or status or prestigious jobs. Success was measured in integrity, in courage, in the strength to do what was right even when it cost you everything. He was a janitor who'd worked double shifts for decades. He was a single father who'd sacrificed everything for his son. He was an invisible man who'd brought down the powerful, and he was proud of all of it. Epilogue. 5 years later, Ward Preston received a letter from Harvard University. The Misty O'Connell Memorial Scholarship Fund had grown significantly, funded by donations from across the country. They wanted Ward to speak at the annual scholarship ceremony. Ward stood before a room full of students, young, bright-eyed, full of potential. He told them about Misty O'Connell, about second chances, about the importance of integrity. And he told them about his son. Gregorio Preston made terrible choices, Ward said. He hurt people, destroyed lives, and paid the price. But he's also taking responsibility. He's teaching other inmates, working toward his degree, becoming a peer counselor. He won't be defined by his worst moments. He'll be defined by what he does with his second chance. After the ceremony, a young woman approached Ward. She was the recipient of the scholarship, a pre-med student from Dorchester who reminded Ward achingly of Gregorio at that age. Thank you, she said, for fighting for justice, and for showing us that it's never too late to do the right thing. Ward smiled. Make the most of your opportunity. And remember, success isn't about how high you climb. It's about who you lift up along the way. That night, Ward visited Gregorio in prison. His son had been moved to a lower security facility for good behavior. In 3 more years, he'd be eligible for parole. "I heard about your speech," Gregorio said. They sat in the visitation room, comfortable with each other now in a way they'd never been before. "I'm glad you told the truth. I'm glad you told them who I really was. Not the monster, but not the hero either. Just someone trying to be better. That's all any of us can do," Ward replied. As Ward left the prison that evening, the setting sun painted the sky orange and gold. He thought about the journey that had brought him here, the pain, the betrayal, the justice, the reconciliation. It hadn't been easy. It never would be, but it had been worth it. Because in the end, Ward Preston had done what every father should do. He'd loved his son enough to save him from himself, even when it meant destroying the life that son had built on lies. And that, Ward knew, was the greatest success of all. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.